Today we are covering the emotional drivers behind back pain. Whew, buckle up. This is a big one. I know a lot of people out there suffer with back pain. It's really one of the most common conditions we hear. Yet again, this is one of those things that I particularly have quite a history with. Nearly everyone in my family struggles with this. And that's really because our spine and its connecting structures are vital. They're a vital part of our day-to-day life, right? Because of the frequency with which we hear about back pain, I feel like we have a belief that this kind of pain is inevitable, but it isn't actually the case in other societies and cultures to deal with back pain the way we specifically as Americans deal with it. Now, our amazing and complex mind-body connection can even break down each vertebrae in the spine to a particular emotion or feeling that might be associated with pain or weakness in that area. And the back is far too complex and involved to cover in this short episode. So I'm going to go ahead and hone in on one particular part, and that is lower back. So this is really about low back pain. Welcome back to the Mind Change Podcast. I'm your host, Heather McKean. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and download. It really helps us to continue to create all these great content for you and others, and lets us know if we're meeting the needs of our community. So I'm going to go ahead and hone in on one particular part, and that is lower back. So this is really about low back pain. Now, even within the low back, the lumbar spine, you can find more detailed and refined emotions depending on which vertebrae might be involved. But for now, I'm going to speak kind of generally about the low back area. So the basic known emotion in dealing with back pain is support. Okay, and that makes sense metaphorically, considering that our spine is used for our basic bodily support, right? Our basic balance between emotional, financial, and physical sustenance, as well as our sense of security, are located here. There's a significant need for nurturing being displayed when there is low back problems. So we're in effect abandoned at an early age emotionally. And incidentally, that pattern can also develop or be precipitated or activated in response to growing older. The basic balance between emotional, financial, and physical well-being, as well as our sense of security, all can be found metaphorically represented in the low back. So one of the really big factors here is that we find is a need for nurturing. So low back problems is telling us that in our early years, we may have felt abandoned, at least emotionally. Incidentally, this pattern can also develop as we grow older. So there can be a feeling as we grow older that we are somehow being abandoned, or that the need for us or our ability to be in the world or valuable to the world is being challenged, and that can actually start to affect us in our low back. So it's interesting because oftentimes people will say, it's one of the most common things we hear is like, oh, getting older, my low back hurts, like got that back pain going, and it's directly connected with aging, but it's really not. It's very common in our society because of the way that we view value and worth, that as we grow older, as our outside beauty or our outside appearance and how much reliance we've put on that starts to falter, or we maybe are not as useful in our jobs anymore, or maybe in our family we start to feel a little bit less needed and less useful. All of those things actually start to contribute to that feeling in our back. There are plenty of people, even in the United States and around the world, that are what we may say advanced in age, that do not suffer with low back pain. I remember living in Africa and marveling at the flexibility of so many of the people that I was seeing there. Older women who, believe me, and men who did not have easy lives by any stretch of the imagination. And they would bend so effectively. We're taught, bend with your knees and pick up things with your knees. And they would bend right at their waist and just pick up huge bundles of things. And I remember looking at them and watching and thinking, their backs seem to work different than our backs work in America. And let me tell you, physiologically, there is no difference. But sociologically and in our structures of the way that we think about life are very different. And that actually can have a profound impact on where we begin to feel stuck or limited or sore, if you will. And especially in American cultures, our back really takes a big hit here. So again, going back to some of the core beliefs that are present when we're talking about low back pain, are not feeling supported in life. So then our back becomes that primary target for expressing these things that we're feeling deeply inside, or these beliefs that we have. So there can also be a strong connection with deprivation, right? Feelings of deprivation as a child. And again, that can come from some of our basic needs like food or money or clothing or safety or shelter. But it can also just be love and nurturing. And that can show up in our adult life as a lack of support. So for these people, all of us who have struggled with low back pain, it's also common to have issues around anger. And it's usually unresolved anger from childhood. So that doesn't necessarily mean that if you suffer from low back pain, you're an angry person. Sometimes that means that you actually don't express anger very much and you've held on to it, but it gets triggered in various ways in day-to-day life. And what you see is often those people get angrier and angrier as they age, and then they get a little bit more bent over and they have a lot more pain in their back. So one of the biggest triggers for this lack of support can be in the area of finances. So feelings of over-responsibility or deprivation can really show up in finances, right? They can, and it can be surprising for people who have been feeling like they're financially successful, but the problem isn't actually around the having of money. It's the pressure around the providing and the responsibility that finances bring. So equally, where you have someone who feels like there's such a lack in their finances and, they've never had and they've always struggled with finances, can have low back pain. So broke people can have low back pain, but oftentimes people who are very abundant in their financial, at least in their bank account, can have that back pain because the way they see the finances is like it keeps them stuck. It's responsibility. There's more of a burden that they feel like they're carrying around the money. So again, it's not the having or not having, it's the belief systems we have or the emotions that we attach to money that can often show up in our low back area. So often for the people who are feeling like this belief system around money, it can actually lead to self-sabotage in career and in work lives. These people may be dealing with deeply buried fear around being a failure and an inability to express boundaries, especially with loved ones. And that can, again, show up in the back. Right? It can also be associated, low back pain, with people who feel that they need to earn their worth or that their value is determined by their perceived success. And again, that goes back often financially. So if they think that their worth is determined by their success, and then that's determined about how much money they have in the bank, that can be something that is really showing up in the low back area. Sometimes low back pain can have its roots in sexual dysregulation. So if there were times when sex was perceived as transactional, or if it was used to control or to be controlled, then that can find its expression in the low back. If there were times when sex was linked with shame, or that it resulted in being overly connected to someone, so sometimes enmeshment, then the low back can be the messenger of that particular dysregulation as well. Now, one of the common secondary gains or benefits from low back pain is, again, as so often so many of these things are, the necessity of taking a break and to stop working or stop carrying such heavy loads without having to feel guilty or feel like you're failing, right? Like, it's one thing to need a break and to stop just because it's like, whoa, this is too much. But if your back literally cannot do it, who can blame you for that, right? But then this keeps us in a vicious cycle, because then the back seems to keep you from working or showing up in your best effort. And on one hand, that supports your need for a break from all the pressure and responsibility. But then it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy when you're eventually so disabled that you can't be relied upon any longer. So if you already have a belief that you're unsupported, then the disability feels like another example of people really not being able to be there for you. So for low back pain, we need to do work around self-worth, around support, around abundance. Those all really are crucial. And becoming our own power and our own biggest support system are going to be really key to healing. Now, if you're interested in an even deeper dive into the back and spine from an emotional standpoint, Dr. John Sarno, he really has a lot of the resources. So Healing Back Pain, The Mind-Body Connection is one of his books. Also, The Mind-Body Prescription, Healing the Body, Healing the Pain. I can link a few of those in the show notes for you. And that can even be a deeper dive for you into the emotional components behind back pain and low back pain. Okay, so there's just a little touch on some of the low back issues and some of the emotional components behind it. I'd like to thank you for joining us every other week as we dive deeper into this fascinating topic of emotional drivers behind disease, ailments, and illness. Please keep leaving those 5-star reviews. If there is a particular symptom, disease, ailment that you would like for us to cover, please put it in the comment section there. And then until next time, thanks for joining us again on the Mind Change Podcast, where we are changing the world one mind at a time.